Forced marriages occur when individuals are coerced into marriage against their will, often due to cultural, familial, or social pressures. This practice denies personal consent and can lead to severe psychological, emotional, and physical harm. Victims may face threats, violence, or severe repercussions if they resist. Forced marriages can result in a lack of autonomy, compromised personal freedom, and a lifetime of unwanted obligations. Efforts to combat forced marriages include legal frameworks, advocacy, and support services aimed at protecting individual rights and promoting awareness about the detrimental impacts of this practice. Hello, aloha, bonjour, hola, hello, hujambo, marhaba, ni hao, namaste, everyone, welcome to Crime Watch Vault. Today's story takes us to northern Victoria, Australia, a region known for its diverse landscapes, including lush vineyards, fertile farmlands, and vibrant river systems. The area is a hub for agriculture, producing a variety of fruits, vegetables, and wine. Northern Victoria's Murray River offers recreational activities like boating and fishing, attracting nature enthusiasts. The region also boasts rich cultural heritage, with historic towns and indigenous sites. Its blend of natural beauty and rural charm makes it a unique destination, reflecting the quintessential Australian countryside lifestyle. Ruqia Hadari was born in Afghanistan in 2004. Facing conflict and instability in their homeland, her family decided to seek a better future in Australia. In September 2018, when Rukia was 14 years old, the Haidari family immigrated to northern Victoria. Adjusting to a new country and culture presented challenges, but the Haidaris were determined to build a new life. Rukia enrolled in a local high school shortly after their arrival. By early 2019, she was attending classes and rapidly learning English. She excelled in her studies, quickly making friends and becoming a well-liked member of the school community. Her ambition was to pursue higher education and eventually establish a career, which was encouraged by her teachers and friends. Life in northern Victoria for Rukia was a blend of new experiences and maintaining her cultural heritage. The family remained connected to their Afghan roots, attending cultural events and gatherings within the local Afghan community. Ruqia Hadari and Muhammad Ali met in early March 2022 through their families, who arranged the meeting with the hope of uniting their children in marriage. The initial introduction took place on March 3, 2022, during a family gathering at Rukia's home in northern Victoria. Both families, adhering to cultural traditions, believed the match would be beneficial and socially acceptable. The meeting was scheduled for the late afternoon, around 5 p.m. During this time, Rukia and Muhammad were given a brief opportunity to converse privately, albeit under the watchful eyes of their families. Despite her reservations, Rukia felt pressured to accept the match due to her family's expectations. Their engagement was swiftly arranged, and the wedding followed just 2 months later, on May 14, 2022. Ruqia Hadari and Muhammad Ali were married on May 14, 2022, in a small, traditional ceremony attended by family and close friends. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Rukia felt pressured into the union by her family's expectations. Almost immediately after the wedding, Muhammad's behavior began to change, and the first signs of control emerged. In the initial weeks of their marriage, Muhammad restricted Ruqiya's movements and interactions. By early June 2022, he had cut off her contact with friends and limited her phone use. Rukia was also forbidden from continuing her education or seeking employment, which crushed her dreams of independence and self-sufficiency. By late June 2022, the control escalated into verbal and emotional abuse. Muhammad frequently belittled Rukia, calling her names and undermining her confidence. The isolation and constant criticism left Rukia feeling trapped and alone, a common tactic in abusive relationships to weaken the victim's sense of self-worth and support network. The abuse turned physical in July 2022. The first incident occurred late at night after a disagreement about household chores. Muhammad slapped Rukia, leaving her shocked and terrified. Over the following months, these violent episodes became more frequent and severe. Each assault left Rukia with bruises and injuries that she tried to hide from the outside world. She became adept at covering up her injuries with clothing and makeup, fearing the shame and dishonor that revealing the truth might bring to her family. Throughout the latter half of 2022 and into early 2023, the abuse intensified. Muhammad's violent outbursts were unpredictable, and Rukia lived in constant fear. On several occasions, neighbors heard disturbances but were unaware of the extent of the violence. Rukia's cultural background and the stigma surrounding domestic issues made it difficult for her to seek help. One particularly brutal incident occurred on January 23, 2023. After another argument, Muhammad beat Rukia so severely that she was unable to leave the house for days. This incident marked a turning point, as Rukia's health and spirit began to deteriorate rapidly. She became more withdrawn and isolated, and her physical injuries took longer to heal. Despite the escalating violence, Rukia felt unable to escape. Her pleas for help to her mother were met with advice to endure the abuse to avoid bringing shame to the family. This cultural pressure compounded her sense of hopelessness. The day Rukia was found unresponsive. On the morning of March 15, 2023, Ruqia Hadari's life came to a tragic and abrupt end. The events of that day began around 8 a.m. when a neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, was awakened by loud, disturbing noises coming from Ruqia's home. The noises, which sounded like shouting and crashing, were unusual for the typically quiet neighborhood in northern Victoria. Concerned, Mrs. Thompson decided to check on Ruqia. By 8:15 a.m., after receiving no response from her knocking, Mrs. Thompson entered Ruqia's home. She found Ruqia lying unresponsive on the living room floor, covered in bruises and showing signs of severe trauma. Panicked, Mrs. Thompson immediately called emergency services, describing the scene and urging them to hurry. Paramedics arrived on the scene by 8:30 a.m. and quickly assessed Ruqia's condition. She had multiple injuries, including visible bruises and contusions, suggesting prolonged physical abuse. The paramedics worked to stabilize her as they prepared for immediate transport to the nearest hospital. During this time, Ruqia showed no signs of consciousness. At approximately 9 a.m., Ruqia was rushed to Northern Victoria Hospital. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, her condition remained critical. Upon arrival, a team of doctors and nurses took over, administering emergency treatment in an attempt to save her life. Unfortunately, Rukia's injuries were too severe. By 10:15 a.m., despite all medical efforts, Rukia was pronounced dead. The news of Rukia's death quickly spread, leading to a police investigation. Detectives arrived at Rukia's home by noon, cordoning off the area as a crime scene. They began interviewing neighbors, including Mrs. Thompson, who recounted the events leading up to the discovery of Rukia's body. The police collected evidence from the home, including signs of struggle and other indications of a violent altercation. Throughout the investigation, it became clear that Rukia had been a victim of ongoing domestic abuse. Medical reports confirmed that her injuries were consistent with repeated physical assaults. Testimonies from neighbors and friends painted a picture of a young woman who had been isolated and terrorized by her husband, Muhammad Ali. Later that afternoon, Muhammad Ali was located and arrested. He was charged with multiple counts of assault and the murder of Ruqia Hadari. The community was shocked and outraged as the details of the abuse and Ruqia's tragic end came to light. Vigils and memorials were held in her honor, and calls for justice echoed throughout northern Victoria and beyond. The day Ruqia was found unresponsive marked a pivotal moment in the fight against domestic violence and forced marriage in Australia. It highlighted the urgent need for better protective measures and support systems for victims, as well as greater awareness and education within communities to prevent such tragedies from occurring in the future. The evidence against Muhammad Ali was overwhelming. Following Ruqia's death on March 15, 2023, authorities conducted a detailed investigation that included forensic analysis, medical examinations, and interviews with witnesses. The forensic examination revealed that Ruqia had suffered extensive physical abuse over a prolonged period. Her injuries included multiple bruises, fractures, and signs of repeated trauma, consistent with ongoing domestic violence. Witness testimonies, particularly from neighbors and friends, painted a clear picture of the abusive relationship. Neighbors reported hearing frequent arguments and noises indicative of physical violence. Friends of Ruqia testified that she had confided in them about the abuse but felt unable to leave due to cultural and familial pressures. Muhammad was arrested on the same day Ruqia was found unresponsive. During his trial, which began in August 2023, the prosecution presented compelling evidence of his guilt. Medical reports, forensic evidence, and witness testimonies established a clear pattern of abuse. Muhammad's defense, which attempted to argue that the injuries were accidental or self-inflicted, was quickly dismantled by the prosecution. On November 10, 2023, Muhammad Ali was found guilty of multiple counts of assault and the murder of Ruqia Hadari. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. This sentence reflected the severity of his actions and the need for justice for Ruqia. Farida Haidari's involvement in Ruqia's tragic end was more complex. As the investigation unfolded, it became apparent that Farida had known about the abuse her daughter was enduring. Ruqia had confided in her mother on several occasions, seeking help and protection. However, Farida, influenced by cultural norms and the fear of bringing shame to the family, had advised Ruqia to remain in the marriage and endure the abuse. During the trial, it was revealed that Farida had played a significant role in perpetuating Rukia's suffering. Testimonies showed that Farida had actively discouraged Rukia from seeking help, reinforcing the idea that leaving Muhammad would bring dishonor to the family. This complicity made her an accessory to the prolonged abuse and, ultimately, Rukia's death. Farida was arrested shortly after Muhammad's trial concluded. Her trial began in January 2024. The prosecution argued that Farida's actions, or lack thereof, directly contributed to the sustained abuse and eventual death of her daughter. They presented evidence of Farida's awareness of the situation and her repeated advice to Rukia to stay in the marriage despite the danger. On April 22, 2024, Ruqia Hadari was found guilty of being an accessory to assault and manslaughter. The judge, considering the cultural pressures Farida faced, sentenced her to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 7 years. This sentence aimed to balance the need for justice with an understanding of the cultural context that influenced Farida's actions. The tragic case of Ruqia Hadari highlighted the severe consequences of forced marriage and domestic violence. Muhammad Ali's 25-year sentence and Ruqia Hadari's 10-year sentence underscored the justice system's commitment to holding individuals accountable for their roles in such tragedies. This case also served as a stark reminder of the urgent need for better protective measures, education, and support systems for victims of domestic abuse, particularly within immigrant communities where cultural pressures can complicate the ability to seek help. In Australia, forced marriage is a crime under the Commonwealth Criminal Code. It is defined as a marriage where one party enters into the union without full and free consent due to coercion, threat, or deception. The law provides severe penalties for those found guilty of forcing someone into marriage, including imprisonment. There are also support services available for victims, offering legal advice, counseling, and refuge. Following the tragic events, Rukia's family has been deeply affected. Her siblings continue to struggle with the loss, while her mother remains in prison. The community has rallied around the family, offering support and advocating for greater protections against forced marriage. The case has also led to increased efforts to educate communities about the rights of individuals and the resources available to them. The forced marriage of Ruqia Hadari and Muhammad Ali is a stark reminder of the pervasive issue of forced marriages. It calls for continued efforts to raise awareness, support victims, and ensure justice. Through education, legal reforms, and community engagement, Australia can work towards eradicating this practice and protecting the rights of all individuals. Like, subscribe and click the bell.